Organizations run logistics and finance departments on hyper-precise mathematical models. Yet when evaluating their most valuable asset, human performance, they rely entirely on subjective gut instinct. Any functioning performance appraisal process requires three strict components: establishing work standards, assessing performance against those standards, and providing corrective feedback. But the corporate baseline fails at the very first step. Most companies default to the standard graphic rating scale, asking supervisors to grade employees on vague, abstract traits like integrity, teamwork, or quality. Look at this interface. What does a 4 in integrity actually mean? Lacking objective definitions, every supervisor interprets the scale differently. This unscientific instrument instantly produces corrupted data. When scores dictate compensation or termination, subjective ratings collapse under scrutiny, rendering them legally indefensible. To generate valid data and survive an audit, organizations must discard these vague forms entirely. They must engineer a measurement instrument from the ground up that accounts for human psychology. Vague grading scales distort human judgment. Raters display central tendency, clustering everyone in the middle, or exhibit strictness based on their own personality. Furthermore, the halo effect causes a positive impression of one trait to artificially inflate every other independent metric. But the most dangerous failure mode occurs when demographic factors override objective reality. Performance appraisal studies reveal a predictable pattern. Evaluators who score high in a trait known as social dominance actively penalize competence in certain demographics. The data reveals a stark, counterintuitive reality. High-performing female subordinates frequently receive lower evaluation scores from these specific evaluators, precisely because they demonstrate strong competence signals. Relying on a subjective grading scale actively punishes top performers, embeds discrimination directly into the corporate structure, and invites severe equal employment opportunity legal liabilities. Early attempts to patch these specific rater errors resulted in forced distribution, famously modeled as the 20-70-10 split, where managers had to place fixed percentages of their staff into predetermined performance categories. Forced distribution technically solves the leniency problem, but it forces managers into a zero-sum game that severely damages morale and engineers toxic internal competition. The engineered solution is the behaviorally anchored rating scale, or BARS. It ties numerical values to verifiable actions, replacing abstract traits with a strict checklist of critical incidents. Earning a perfect 10 requires a highly specific action, convincing a rejected applicant to buy a cheaper model. Conversely, an employee fails the metric if they simply tell a buyer to settle for a standard model rather than waiting for preferred custom options. By anchoring subjective traits to objective, observable behaviors, organizations isolate the metrics. This explicitly neutralizes the halo effect and guarantees a legally defensible performance record. Even a behaviorally anchored scale retains a structural vulnerability. It still relies on a single point of failure, one supervisor's observation. Modern systems solve this through decentralization. Organizations use 360-degree feedback and internal crowd appraisal networks to aggregate data from multiple peers and subordinates, averaging out individual biases. Once that performance data is clean and verified, it must be deployed. Not all high-performing employees require the same organizational investment. The 3x3 talent management matrix maps the strategic endgame. It cross-references an employee's verified performance score against their position's strategic value to the company's survival. Landing in the top right quadrant triggers a specific mandate: bespoke development, rewards, and retention protocols. But those falling into the low-performance, non-critical quadrant trigger a completely different action plan: immediate replacement, outsourcing, or dismissal. Objective performance measurement is useless in a vacuum. It only generates a return on investment when it is used to aggressively dictate strategic resource allocation across the workforce. This brings us to a crucial operational evolution, driven by total quality management. The annual retroactive performance review is an obsolete concept. Today, the modern operational standard replaces the yearly review with continuous feedback loops and real-time electronic performance monitoring. The appraisal interview is no longer a corrective autopsy of past mistakes. It functions as an active engine for future psychological engagement. To build that engagement, leaders must establish role meaningfulness, provide psychological safety, and prove to the workforce that the organization operates with objective fairness. Leaders must audit their measurement instruments immediately. A mathematically flawed, biased appraisal system will inevitably architect a structurally compromised and legally vulnerable organization.